At first, Wall Street looked exactly like Wall Street always had: busy, expensive, impatient, and completely convinced that nothing could ever happen to it. It was September 16, 1920, just after noon in Lower Manhattan, and clerks, receptionists, brokers, messengers, and office workers were spilling into the streets for lunch when a plain horse-drawn cart stopped in front of the USA office, across from J.P. Morgan, and the driver stepped away and vanished into the crowd. A few moments later, the cart exploded. The blast tore through the financial district with enough force to kill more than 30 people instantly, injure about 300 more, and leave New York stunned by an act of violence that remains officially unsolved to this day. In the first seconds after the explosion, no one understood the full scale of what had happened. There was smoke, shattered glass, twisted metal, and bodies in the street. The New York Stock Exchange closed immediately. Police and soldiers rushed in from Governor's Island, helping the wounded, securing the area, and searching for evidence. The city moved fast to restore order, but that speed came at a cost. Crews cleaned the damage overnight, and investigators later believed that some of the physical evidence they needed to solve the case had already been lost. By the next morning, Wall Street was functioning again, bandages and broken windows undercut by the stubborn machinery of business, as if the city was determined to pretend it had not just been attacked. The bomb itself was not a crude accident. Investigators later determined that it had been packed with TNT and iron window sash weights, and that it was detonated by a timer after the perpetrators had already left the scene. That detail matters because it means the attack was planned with cold precision. This was not panic, it was choreography. Whoever built that device understood timing, placement, and the psychology of terror. They did not just want to kill. They wanted to strike the heart of American finance in broad daylight and make sure the city felt it. The question that followed was the one New York could not answer. Who did it? No group claimed responsibility. The Bureau of Investigation, the New York Police Department, and the Secret Service all pursued leads, interviewing hundreds of people who had been near the area before, during, and after the explosion. They found very little that could be trusted. Witnesses remembered fragments, but the driver's face, the wagon, and the precise movements before the blast were too vague to build a clean case. That is how a major act of violence can become a historical shadow, not because it was small, but because it was carried out with enough discipline to outlast the first frantic hours of the investigation. Then a strange clue appeared. Before the explosion, a letter carrier had found 4 crudely printed flyers in the area, signed by a group calling itself the American Anarchist Fighters. The flyers demanded the release of political prisoners. Investigators later noticed that they resembled leaflets used in earlier bomb campaigns linked to Italian anarchists. The clue pushed the case into the darker political currents of the era, where fear of radicals, communists, labor unrest, immigration, and revolutionary violence were all tangled together in the American imagination. The Bureau searched up and down the East Coast for the source of the flyers, but the trail went cold. To understand why the attack hit so hard, you have to understand the mood of the country in 1920. America had just come through World War I, and the post-war years were full of fear, labor conflict, and political suspicion. In that atmosphere, one theory that gained traction was that the bombing was an act of terror by Reds, meaning anarchists and communist sympathizers who wanted to strike at the symbols of American capitalism. Another theory suggested that the real target might have been the adjacent sub-treasury building, where a massive transfer of gold bars was taking place that day. The lack of a confession meant no theory ever fully died, and the bombing remained trapped between motive and mystery. That uncertainty is what makes this story so powerful. Unlike a war battle with a clear army and a clear front line, this attack was hidden inside ordinary civic life. It happened at lunchtime. It used a horse cart. It struck the financial center of the United States without warning. And even now, historians and investigators have never reached a final, unanimous answer on who was behind it. The FBI's historical account says the best evidence suggests a small group of Italian anarchists, but also stresses that the case was never conclusively solved. Britannica likewise notes that the bombing remains unsolved, while describing the leading theories that have followed it for more than a century. The human cost was immediate and brutally personal. J.P. Morgan's chief clerk, William Joyce, was among the dead, and Junius Morgan, the son of J.P. Morgan Jr., was wounded. 8 people later died from their injuries, bringing the death toll to 38 according to Britannica. The blast was heard across Lower Manhattan and even across the East River in Brooklyn. For the people who lived through it, this was not a case. It was a rupture. The city had been made to feel vulnerable in the very place it believed itself most untouchable. If you make this story for a US audience, the real hook is not just the explosion. It is the idea that a single anonymous act can expose the nerves of an entire nation. Wall Street was not just a street, it was a symbol. The bomb hit the symbol, but the aftermath revealed something even more unsettling. The attack was never fully explained, never fully avenged, and never fully forgotten. That unresolved ending is the kind of history people remember because it leaves a permanent question mark in the national memory. The Library of Congress preserves an image of the aftermath precisely because the scene became part of American historical record, not just criminal history. So the information your audience gets from this script is bigger than one bombing. They learn how fear of radicals shaped post-war America, how a single attack could paralyze the financial center of the country, how early federal investigators worked before modern forensic tools existed, and how some of the most frightening events in history remain unsolved because evidence disappears, witnesses disagree, and time erases certainty. Most of all, they learn that the most shocking stories are not always the ones with the loudest endings. Sometimes they are the ones that never give you one.